response to my request.
Good evening. It was an action-packed day that focused on augmenting India's medical infrastructure needed to effectively fight COVID-19. Prime Minister Narendra Modi held 3 meetings today to review the COVID-19 situation in the country and preparedness to battle the pandemic. Even as the Indian Air Force swung into action, it carried out sorties from various parts of the country to airlift oxygen containers, cylinders, essential medicines and equipment for setting up and sustaining COVID hospitals and facilities. That's not all. 23 mobile oxygen generation plants are being airlifted from Germany. They will be deployed in AFMS hospitals catering to the COVID-19 patients. Our in focus tonight is battling COVID. PM urges states and industry to work in unison. That and more in this edition of News Night. I'm Munman Bhattacharya. Let's get started with the headlines. Prime Minister Narendra Modi holds 3 meetings to bolster India's preparedness in the fight against COVID-19, interacts with chief ministers of 11 worst-hit states and union territories, calls upon states to battle the pandemic with collective power, check hoarding and black marketing of oxygen and medicines, and focus on testing and vaccination. PM Modi interacts with leading oxygen manufacturers across the country, stresses on the need to maintain good coordination between the government and the oxygen producers, underscores the need to increase availability of oxygen cylinders and upgrade logistics facilities for oxygen transportation, urges industry to utilize tankers meant to transport other gases for oxygen supply. Indian Air Force swings into action, carries out sorties to airlift oxygen containers, cylinders, essential medicines and equipment for setting up and sustaining COVID hospitals and facilities. AFMS to import 23 mobile oxygen generation plants from Germany to tide over the surge in cases. Oxygen express trains pressed into service to transport liquid medical oxygen tankers. Government extends help to the poor amid the COVID crisis, decides to allocate additional 5 kgs free of cost food grains per person per month to nearly 80 crore beneficiaries covered under the National Food Security Act for May and June. Home Minister Amit Shah, Defence Minister Rajnath Singh and BJP President JP Nadda welcomed the decision. Union Health Minister Dr. Harshvardhan reviews preparedness of central government hospitals in Delhi to battle the COVID-19 pandemic. Hospitals outline steps being taken for augmenting availability of beds to cater to the immediate needs of COVID patients. DRDO Tata Sons oxygen generation plans to be installed in the hospitals. Indian Banking Association urges states to reduce working hours of banks. States step up the fight against COVID-19. Home Minister Amit Shah visits Dhanvantri COVID Hospital in Ahmedabad. Union Minister Sadanand Gowda visits a company producing Remdesivir in Bengaluru, says its production will be increased. In UP, weekend corona lockdown to be in place from 8 p.m. on Friday to 7 a.m. on Monday. 14 COVID patients in ICU die in a fire in Vijay Vallabh COVID Centre in Maharashtra's Virar. Patients shifted to other hospitals. PM approves ex-gratia of 2 lakh rupees each for the next of kin of the deceased and 50,000 rupees for the seriously injured. Maharashtra government orders a probe into the cause of the fire. Japanese Prime Minister Suga declares a state of emergency in Tokyo, Osaka and 2 other prefectures. Move aimed at combating a surge in coronavirus cases 3 months before the Tokyo Olympics is set to open. Japanese Prime Minister promises to ensure a safe Tokyo Olympics. Our top focus tonight, Prime Minister Narendra Modi held 3 meetings today to review the COVID-19 situation in the country and preparedness to battle the pandemic. After an internal meeting, PM chaired a meeting with chief ministers of 11 high-burden states and union territories, where he urged the states to check hoarding and black marketing of oxygen and medicines, ensure smooth movement of oxygen tankers from one state to another, and he also urged states to set up a high-level coordination committee to carry oxygen to different hospitals of the state. PM also interacted with leading oxygen manufacturers across the country and underscored the need to increase availability of oxygen cylinders and utilize tankers that are meant to transport other gases for oxygen supply.
Prime Minister Narendra Modi held 3 meetings on Friday on COVID-19 situation in view of surge in coronavirus cases across the country. First up was a high-level internal meeting on measures to tackle the COVID-19 pandemic, followed by a high-level meeting on COVID-19 situation with chief ministers of 11 states and union territories which have reported maximum number of cases recently. The meeting was also attended by Home Minister Amit Shah, Union Minister Piyush Goyal and Niti Aayog Member Health Dr. V.K. Paul, among others. Prime Minister in the afternoon interacted with leading oxygen manufacturers across the country via video conference. In his meeting with chief ministers of 11 states and union territories, Prime Minister called for working together to fight the pandemic with collective power. He said the biggest basis of India's success during the first wave of the pandemic was a united efforts and united strategy, and reiterated that we will have to address this challenge in the same way. PM Modi assured centre's full support to all the states in this fight. On oxygen supply, PM Modi took note of the points raised by the states and said that industrial oxygen has been diverted to meet immediate requirements. PM Modi urged all states to work together and coordinate with one another to fulfill requirements relating to medicines and oxygen. He urged the states to check hoarding and black marketing of oxygen and medicines. PM said that every state should ensure that no oxygen tanker, whether it is meant for any state, is stopped or gets stranded. PM Modi stated the central government is working on all possible options to reduce the travel time and turnaround time of oxygen tankers. For this, Railways has started Oxygen Express. Empty oxygen tankers are also being transported by the Air Force to reduce one-way travel time. PM remarked that a vaccination program should not slow down in this situation. PM Modi mentioned that India is running the world's largest vaccination drive, and so far more than 15 crore vaccine doses have been provided free of cost to the states by the Government of India. From May 1st, PM Modi added the vaccine is going to be available to all citizens above 18 years of age. PM Modi said that vaccination drive needs to move ahead in mission mode to get more and more people vaccinated. PM Modi said that along with measures for treatment of patients, hospital safety is also very important. In his interaction with leading oxygen manufacturers, Prime Minister said this time is not only to deal with the challenges but also to provide solutions in a very short time. PM Modi stressed on the need to maintain good coordination between the government and the oxygen producers. PM appreciated the oxygen producers for increasing their production in the last few weeks. He also thanked the industry for diverting industrial oxygen to meet medical requirements in the country. PM noted that there is a need to increase the availability of oxygen cylinders as well as upgrade the logistics facilities for transportation of oxygen. He urged the industry to utilize tankers meant to transport other gases for oxygen supply. PM Modi remarked that the government, the states, industries and the transporters and all hospitals need to work in unison to battle COVID-19 pandemic, as the better the synergy and coordination, the easier it will be able to deal with this challenge. Meanwhile, the Indian Air Force has swung into action by carrying out sorties from various parts of the country to airlift oxygen containers, cylinders, essential medicines, equipment required for setting up and sustaining COVID-19 hospitals and facilities in the fight against fresh surge in COVID-19 cases. The IAF transport aircraft and helicopters have been pressed into service for carrying out these tasks. These include transport aircraft C-17, C-130J, IL-76, AN-32 and Avro, Chinook and Mi-17 helicopters are on standby. Moreover, Armed Forces Medical Services has decided to import oxygen generation plants and containers from Germany amid shortage of oxygen in the hospitals during the second wave of COVID-19 across the country. In another important decision, Ministry of Defence is giving extension to short service commissioned doctors in AFMS till 31st of December 2021 to tide over the current surge in medical services. This will augment the strength of AFMS by 238 more doctors. Besides, government is working on all possible options to reduce the travel time and turnaround time of oxygen tankers. For this, Indian Railways has taken an initiative and started Oxygen Express train. Bureau Report, DD India.
Union Health Minister Dr. Harshvardhan reviewed the preparedness of central government hospitals in Delhi to battle COVID-19, and at the meeting, 4 hospitals, Safdarjung Hospital, Dr. RML Hospital, Lady Hardinge Medical College and AIIMS New Delhi informed him about immediate steps being taken for augmenting the availability of beds to cater to the immediate needs of COVID patients. It was decided that installation of DRDO Tata Sons oxygen generation plants would take place at AIIMS, NIC Jhajjar, Safdarjung, Lady Hardinge Medical College and RML Hospital immediately. These plants shall have a capacity to generate 1,000 litres of oxygen per minute. States too continued their efforts to expand medical infrastructure or increase restrictions to curb the surging cases of COVID-19.
The second wave of coronavirus continues in India and record numbers of COVID-19 cases are being reported every day. Union Health Minister Dr. Harshvardhan took stock of the COVID-19 management situation in Delhi. He reviewed the preparations to deal with the pandemic in hospitals run by the central government and AIIMS. He instructed that all necessary steps be taken to ensure availability of ICU and oxygen beds as well as strengthening the hospital infrastructure.
अस्पतालों को यह भी कहा गया है कि वो आने वाले समय में अगर कोविड के संदर्भ में सर्ज और ज़्यादा तेज़ी से आगे बढ़ता है तो उस परिस्थिति में भी अस्पतालों में और भारी संख्या में बेड्स बढ़ाने के लिए तैयारी अपनी कर रखें.
The Union Health Minister also reviewed the status of availability of oxygen and the steps being taken to increase the supply. The Union Health Minister directed to speed up the installation of 5 PSA plants in hospitals across Delhi. It was also decided to set up oxygen generation plants jointly with DRDO Tata Sons at AIIMS, NIC Jhajjar, Safdarjung and RML hospitals.
ऑक्सीजन से संबंधित जो समस्याएं या परसेप्शन देश में या दिल्ली शहर में बन रहा था या बनाया जा रहा था, उसके संदर्भ में भारत सरकार ने बहुत प्रभावी कदम उठाए हैं. भारत सरकार ने कंट्रोल रूम्स स्थापित किए हैं, जिन कंट्रोल रूम्स में वरिष्ठ अधिकारी इस बात को भी सुनिश्चित करेंगे कि जिन स्टेट्स को जो कोटा ऑक्सीजन का अलॉट किया गया है वो सारा का सारा उनको हर रोज मिल रहा है कि नहीं मिल रहा है.
With increasing cases in the capital, continuous supply of oxygen to hospitals is being arranged. The Delhi police is helping to ensure smooth and swift passage of the oxygen tankers to hospitals. Meanwhile, Chairman of Delhi Sir Gangaram Hospital has said that false information was being circulated that all the victims of COVID-19 succumbed to the disease in the hospital and died due to lack of oxygen.
जहाँ हमारा प्रेशर कभी आज नहीं कम हो, 3 दिन पहले हमारा ऑक्सीजन प्रेशर कम हो गया था आईसीयू बेड में, तब हमने उनको मैनुअली दी थी ऑक्सीजन. हमने किसी को उसकी वजह से नहीं मारने दिया था कि ये ऑक्सीजन नहीं मिली आ रही पीछे या लो प्रेशर से आ रही है, तो ये गलत है. बाकी अभी आज हमें आइनॉक्स ने इंश्योर किया था मॉर्निंग है, यदि स्टेट गवर्नमेंट उनको वो देती है एनओसी तो 9,000 to 10,000 क्यूबिक मीटर डेली सप्लाई कर सकती है।
Meanwhile, Union Home Minister Amit Shah visited Dhanvantri COVID-19 hospital in Ahmedabad, Gujarat. Union Minister Sadanand Gowda visited a company producing Remdesivir in Bangalore. He said that the production of the drug will be increased to boost availability.
We had a detailed discussion with the Mylan company manufacturers with regard to the supply of Remdesivir to the state of Karnataka as well as the other places. The total production size need to be increased. That also they have agreed and they have given a chart how they are going to increase it 2-3 times here.
The Health Minister of Maharashtra has said that there will be emphasis on vaccination on a large scale in the state. He said that the average daily vaccination in Maharashtra can be ramped up to cross 6 lakhs.
आने वाले दिनों में जल्द से जल्द सभी रेट्स और इसको देखते हुए किस तरह से नीति बनाएं, यह डिसीजन हम लेंगे और जल्द से जल्द 18 से 44 साल के जो उम्र के लोग हैं उनको वैक्सीनेशन कराएंगे।
In Uttar Pradesh, weekend corona lockdown will be in place from 8 p.m. Friday to 7 a.m. Monday. During this period, a cleanliness, sanitization and surveillance campaign will be carried out. Vaccination will be done on Saturday.
प्रदेश सरकार अधिक से अधिक लोगों को टीका लगाने का जो एक प्रयास कर रही है उसको आगे बढ़ाया जा रहा है। सभी से अनुरोध है कि जो भी पात्र उम्र के हैं वो अपना नजदीकी केंद्र पर जाकर अपना टीका लगाएं।
Meanwhile, Chief Minister Tirath Singh Rawat called an all-party meeting to discuss the condition of coronavirus in Uttarakhand.
50 लाख के लगभग और वो जहां भी होंगे उन सबको टीकाकरण हम करेंगे। इसका सारा व्यवहार हम लोग पूरी तरह से मेरी सरकार उठाएगी। हमने सभी हॉस्पिटलों को कहा कि वो 75% आप ओपीडी छोड़कर पूरी तरह कोविड के लिए इस्तेमाल करेंगे।
Madhya Pradesh Chief Minister Shivraj Singh Chauhan addressed public representatives of rural areas and rural bodies on Friday. He said that this time corona has reached every village. In such a situation, proper treatment for those infected as well as saving others by breaking the chain is the only way to overcome this challenge.
ये कोरोना कर्फ्यू जनता का, जनता के लिए, जनता के द्वारा कर्फ्यू है। 14,700 पंचायतों में जनता कोरोना कर्फ्यू लगा चुकी है। बाजार में, मेले में, शहरों में नहीं जाना है।
The Rajasthan government has started preparations to open COVID care center in Bilwa in Jaipur. The center will open on 25th of April and will have a capacity of 500 beds in the first phase.
पेशेंट को वहाँ फैसिलिटी होगी, वहाँ पे उनको आरटीआर पीसीआर टेस्ट जो सैंपलिंग है वो भी उनको किया जाएगा, जो उनका जो ब्लड टेस्ट है वो भी उनको किया जाएगा और पल्स ऑक्सीमीटर से उनका O2 सैचुरेशन लगातार जांच की जाएगी। यदि किसी पेशेंट को ऑक्सीजन की जरूरत है तो ऑक्सीजन भी वहाँ दी जाएगी।
Overall, it can be said that efforts to treat and break the chain are being made in full earnest across the country. Wearing a mask, maintaining social distance as well as hand washing are key to defeating coronavirus. Bureau Report, DD India.
In view of the sharp rise in COVID-19 cases and resultant increasing demand of medical oxygen across the country, Union Home Minister Amit Shah has reviewed the situation and directed various measures to augment the supply of oxygen for medical purposes. Accordingly, an expert group is optimizing and rationalizing the allocation of oxygen to various states and union territories, keeping in view the active cases and to reduce time for movement of medical oxygen. Ministry of Home Affairs has written to all states and union territories today to ensure adequate security to oxygen transporting vehicles and to make provisions for exclusive corridors for transportation. Central government has prohibited supply of oxygen for industrial purposes, except those for a few essential sectors. The Department of Promotion of Industry and Internal Trade in the Ministry of Commerce and Industry in the Government of India has decided to monitor the status of transportation and delivery of goods, manufacturing and delivery of essential commodities to the common man, and the difficulties being faced by various stakeholders due to the current restrictions imposed by various states and union territories in view of the surge in COVID-19 cases. DPIIT is setting up a control room to monitor the issues of internal trade, manufacturing, delivery and logistics of essential commodities during the pandemic. In the event of any manufacturing, transportation, distribution, wholesale or e-commerce companies facing difficulties in transportation and in distribution of goods or in mobilization of resources, information can be given at the following telephone number or email ID. The numbers are 011-2306-2383 and 011 being the prefix and Delhi code 2306-2975. There's an email ID as well, and that is DPIIT control-room @gov.in. You can note down these telephone numbers that are on your screens. The telephone numbers will remain functional from 8 a.m. to 10 p.m. with effect from the 24th of April 2021. So these two telephone numbers and email ID is there. If you face any difficulties with regards to transportation, if any essential goods are not coming, then you can contact on this particular email ID or the two telephone numbers that have already been given out. India's new daily COVID cases continue to rise. The country registered 3,32,730 new cases in the last 24 hours. 10 states including Maharashtra, Uttar Pradesh, Delhi, Karnataka, Kerala, Chhattisgarh, Madhya Pradesh, Tamil Nadu, Gujarat and Rajasthan report 75.01% of the new cases. Maharashtra has reported the highest daily new cases at 67,013. It is followed by Uttar Pradesh with 34,254, while Kerala reported 26,995 new cases. India's total active caseload has reached 24,28,616. It now comprises 14.93%, that is very close to 15% of the country's total positive cases. A net decline of 1,37,188 cases were recorded from the total active caseload in the last 24 hours. Well, the cumulative number of COVID-19 vaccine doses administered in the country has crossed 13.54 crore today as part of the world's largest vaccination drive. 8 states account for 59.08% of the cumulative doses given so far in the country. Over 31 lakh vaccination doses were administered in the last 24 hours. Well, the Health Ministry has released clinical guidance for COVID-19 management, and we'll tell you about what that clinical guidance says, because there has been a guidance that has been given for different categories of patients, for those with mild symptoms, those with moderate symptoms and those with severe symptoms. So you have mild disease, you can understand that if you only have upper respiratory tract symptoms or fever. So these are some of the symptoms that are there of mild disease. There should be no shortness of breath or hypoxia. So these are the symptoms of mild disease. You can note this down. If you have any of these symptoms, be sure that you only have mild COVID-19 disease and not moderate or severe disease. Let's move on to the next slide. Home isolation for mild disease. What do you need to do if you are home isolated for mild disease? You need to ensure physical distancing, you need to ensure indoor mask use and strict hand hygiene. What else do you have to do? Let's take a look at the next slide now. You need to keep yourself hydrated. You need to be on antipyretics if you have fever, and antitussive, which prevents cough or treats cough, and also have your multivitamins. And for that, you need to be in regular touch with your treating physician. So that's about the mild disease symptoms that you may have and the home isolation that you would require to be in if you have these mild disease symptoms. Let's take a look now at the next slide, which is coming to you next. Also, very importantly, if you are in home isolation, you need to monitor your temperature using a thermometer and oxygen saturation using your oximeter. We'll tell you soon what the levels are which are satisfactory and when should alarm bells start ringing. Well, as far as mild disease is concerned, you need medical attention if there is difficulty in breathing. So if you have difficulty in breathing, then there is a need to go in for medical attention. You need to inform your doctor that now you have difficulty breathing even though you are in home isolation. High-grade fever or severe cough that lasts for over 5 days. This also is something that requires medical attention. So you may require medical attention if you have these symptoms. Keep low threshold for those with high risk features. So if any of you are in high risk, that is if you're elderly, if you have comorbidities like you are diabetic or you are hypertensive or you have any high disease, then the threshold levels should be lower. So you need to keep in touch with your doctor and keep telling the doctor about the symptoms and how they are changing. Let's now take a look at moderate disease symptoms. Well, respiratory rate then has to be either more than or equal to 24 per minute, or there has to be breathlessness. By this, it means that the number of breaths that you take per minute have to be either 24 or more than 24, and there has to be breathlessness. Then you can be sure that you have moderate disease symptoms. SpO2 levels would be in the range of 90% to 93% range on room air. You can then be reasonably sure that you have moderate disease symptoms. This is as per the clinical guidance that has been given by the Health Ministry on COVID-19 management. Oxygen support, anti-inflammatory or immunomodulatory therapy is what you would require if you are admitted in a ward for moderate disease. So this is just to bring you up to speed with what really happens if you are suffering through moderate disease symptoms. Anticoagulation and clinical monitoring of breathing and lab monitoring, all this is done when you are admitted in a ward for moderate COVID-19. Let's take a look at the next slide now. And these are the severe disease symptoms. You know that you have severe COVID-19 if the respiratory rate, that is the number of breaths that you take per minute, is more than 30, or if you have breathlessness. Only then be sure. If you have mild symptoms, you don't need to panic. SpO2 levels are less than 90% on room air. So if your oximeter is reading less than 90 on room air, you have to call the doctor definitely. ICU admission for severe disease, respiratory support is what you get in ICUs if you have severe symptoms. Anti-inflammatory or immunomodulatory therapy, these are some of the procedures that are undertaken there in a hospital after admission. Anticoagulation, clinical monitoring of breathing as well as lab monitoring, all this is also carried out if you are in an ICU admitted because you have severe COVID-19. And what are the high risk factors for severe disease or mortality? What are the things that make you more vulnerable to getting severe forms of COVID-19 if you're more than 60 years of age, if you're obese, or if you have hypertension? Also, if you have cardiovascular or coronary artery disease, then also you are vulnerable to contracting severe form of COVID-19 and even mortality. Diabetes and other immunocompromised states, if you have any of this, again you are vulnerable to severe form of COVID-19 or mortality. Chronic lung or kidney or liver disease, this also makes you vulnerable to severe COVID-19. So these are the risk factors for which the threshold by and large has to be low. Cerebrovascular disease, that is, there's a problem in the flow of blood to the brain. To some parts of the brain it goes, it doesn't go to some parts of the brain. Then also you are more vulnerable to contracting severe form of COVID-19. Now a look at some of the drugs that are being used in treatment. Emergency use authorization has been given to Remdesivir. It is not to be used in patients not on oxygen support or in home settings. Otherwise, there can be severe side effects. So beware of indiscriminate use of Remdesivir. It needs to be used very judiciously only when inside a hospital if the doctor decides to administer this drug. Moderate or severe disease requiring supplemental oxygen, only then Remdesivir is administered in hospitals by the staff. Well, the other drug which is off-label is tocilizumab. By off-label we mean is that this particular drug was meant for some other disease but is now being given on prescription for COVID-19. If you have severe disease of COVID-19, you may be administered this. Also, if there are significantly raised inflammatory markers, then also you may be administered tocilizumab. Also, if there is no improvement despite use of steroids. So, after use of steroids, if there is no improvement, the doctor may decide to administer tocilizumab in case of severe patients who are admitted in hospitals. Also, one needs to make sure that there is no active bacterial or fungal or tubercular infection before administering tocilizumab, which is an off-label drug. The last but not the least, convalescent plasma therapy. It is an off-label therapy, early moderate disease, preferably within 7 days of symptoms onset. So this basically needs to be given in the early phase of a moderate disease and preferably within 7 days of the onset of symptoms and not later than 7 days. So this is how and when plasma is given. and there has to be availability of high titer donor plasma as well. Well, we'll take a break at this point in time. After the break, we'll discuss why the string of meetings that were chaired by Prime Minister Narendra Modi and one recently just a short while back chaired by Home Minister Amit Shah are important as far as ensuring that you have all the resources and all the decks, all the hands on deck, in fact, in this battle against COVID-19, and also the importance of the clinical guidance that has been released for COVID-19 management. All of that after a short break.
Kitchen waste, green waste, dried leaves from the garden, which are...
Welcome back. You're watching News Night. That brings us to our in focus tonight, which is battling COVID. PM urges states and industry to work in unison. To talk about that and more, we are joined by Dr. Rohit Sareen, former Director, National Institute of Tuberculosis and Respiratory Diseases, and Dr. MC Mishra, Senior Surgeon and former Director, AIIMS, will hopefully be joining us in a short while from now. But let's begin with Dr. Sareen. Dr. Sareen, considering the multiple steps that have been taken to improve the availability of oxygen, considering that many states are raising the demand for higher oxygen, can one be reasonably sure that the issue will be settled, that their supplies of oxygen would be eased with time? And how would you counsel patients at this point in time who think that they are in dire need of oxygen?
Well, I think certain things are very clear. The government is doing all-out efforts. The states are joining hands with the government to ensure that the needy get what they need in terms of this particular disease. However, if we have to battle this disease, it's very critical that the civil society joins hands. All of us have to join hands. So as to reduce transmission, we have to strictly follow the COVID appropriate behavior, which has been so often talked about: washing hands, keeping distance, wearing a mask. We have to ensure that whenever the opportunity is given to us, we take the vaccine. And all these things will definitely improve the reduction in transmission. If this does not happen, then no matter what the resources, we will fall short of it. Whether it is oxygen, whether it is drugs, whether it is hospital beds. Because you see, as they say, that no tap can fill the bucket which is leaking. So if we don't be careful, we are in for a very difficult time. So I would take this opportunity to appeal from this position that, well, all of us must join with the government in its efforts to take care of the transmission risk which we all have.
Absolutely. And as far as the drug Remdesivir is concerned, the clinical guidance for COVID-19 management released by the Home Ministry clearly states that this is not meant for home settings. This is meant only for hospitalized patients, and that there could be severe side effects if it is administered by people without consulting doctors. How important is rationalizing the use of Remdesivir, and also over time can we be sure that there will be adequate availability of the drug, considering that now, since 12th April, 25 new manufacturing sites of Remdesivir have been approved and production capacity is already up from 40 lakhs vials per month to 90 lakhs.
Well, first of all, I want to clarify that, you see, Remdesivir is supposed to act by killing the virus. Why I say supposed to? Because still it is not 100% certain that this is the drug. And in fact, in some of the latest WHO publications, they have very clearly denied its role even in affecting this particular pandemic. So, you know, please don't rush for this drug the moment you are diagnosed as COVID. That is very clear. It is, in the Indian context also, reserved only for very specific situation. In the mild cases, which have already been stated earlier in this program, there is absolutely no need to think of even Remdesivir. And most of the people with mild disease, over 80%, will get all right without, you see, much ado. They just need to take the relevant precautions, they need to isolate themselves, take some vitamins which are prescribed, and so on and so forth. And it is only, you see, when the disease reaches a greater level of severity, that is moderate or severe, that this particular drug is advised. Now, what is happening is that as, you know, most of the people who get infected, in the fear that they may not get this drug when required, they just purchase the drug, hoard the drug. Some of them purchase at exorbitant prices. And what happens? As a consequence, the market availability goes down. As I said that, yes, it is very important and critical that the government does its efforts, but it is equally important and critical that all of us contribute. So please, if you don't need any of the things, whether it is Remdesivir or oxygen, do not rush to the nearest place to buy it.
Prime Minister, in his meeting with Chief Ministers today, said that we need to keep the focus on higher testing. In fact, yesterday testing levels had decreased in Delhi to some extent, and there are reports that the laboratories are particularly overburdened. They're working across shifts, their own staff are falling sick. How important is it to ensure that we keep testing so that the situation does not go out of control? Because the Prime Minister had earlier in one of his meetings with Chief Ministers said that it is important that we test as soon as we have any symptoms of COVID-19 or any common cold-like symptoms, so that the virus does not spread to other members of the family and infect the entire family.
You know, it is very clear, and it is also very simple to understand that the testing will inform the person who is being tested that one is COVID positive or not. And in the event that one is COVID positive, one has to take all the precautions. One has to move towards isolation. One has to look into monitoring of one's oxygen. If a person ignores all this, there are a number of things which will happen. One is that that individual will be transmitting this particular infection to his entire family, will be transmitting this infection to wherever he goes, and may land up into more severer form of the disease and only then seek medical help. So it is very important that anyone who develops even the slightest suspicion in terms of the symptoms that everyone is familiar by now, you know, some fever is there, low grade, maybe something like a blocked nose may be there, cough may be there, and in certain cases even breathlessness is observed. So in that situation, please do not hesitate and go to your nearest center and get yourself tested for the virus. And, you know, we have really, the country has done tremendous work in ramping up the laboratory facilities for the testing. You know, when last year the situation in March, April was very different from what it is today. We are definitely more prepared in diagnosing. But at the same time, we cannot go house to house diagnosing. It is important that the people should participate in this effort And you see, there are a number of suggestions also going on that in certain societies you form smaller groups who would monitor this. There would be people who will be able to help out others in terms of their transfer to different health facilities. So things like that are also coming up. But yes, it is very clear that you need to get tested the moment you develop the symptoms.
The third phase of India's vaccination drive starts from the 1st of May, when those in the 18 to 45 age group would be eligible for jabs. How important is it to continue to keep the focus on vaccination as well? Because there are some people who question the very rationale of vaccination. They say that we get infected even after taking the first dose and even after the second dose. Are these low incidence cases, and does the probability of getting reinfected come down several times after vaccination?
I mean, I think no one who has even manufactured the vaccine has ever claimed that it will prevent infection. What the claim is that yes, if a person develops COVID after the vaccination, the probability of that individual moving on to severe disease, requiring ventilatory support, or even dying is much, much reduced. And we have seen, you see, even in the country data context, that even though the number of cases is going up, the curve is very steep, but that is not so as far as mortality rates or case fatality rate is concerned. That is in fact gradually coming down. So the reason for that is just vaccination. And vaccination is very, very important, you see, to protect the people from severer forms of the disease. It will not only, you see, ensure that the individual does not go into severer forms, but it will also ensure the requirement of these the drugs that we have just talked of, oxygen that we have just talked of. So I will say that this step of reducing the age from the earlier 45 to now 18 years is a very welcome step. We were always aware that this will happen, but in the early stages, one had to prioritize that particular group, which was already having a high mortality risk. And therefore, you see, the government had given this call that, okay, to begin with, we will vaccinate those above 60, those above 45 with comorbidities. And then subsequently, it became anyone above 45 with or without comorbidities will be vaccinated. So these things are a gradual process, and I'm sure that after the 1st of May, as the vaccination drive increases, definitely the severer forms will reduce, and that indirectly also implies reduced deaths and reduced transmission.
Right. Thank you, Dr. Sareen, for speaking to us on the clinical guidance for COVID-19 management and the steps that the government is taking now to battle COVID-19. Well, let's move on. And Union Minister Mansukh Mandaviya has said that production capacity of Remdesivir has been ramped up. In a tweet, he said that since 12th April, 25 new manufacturing sites for Remdesivir's production have been approved. Production capacity is now ramped up to more than 90 lakhs vials per month. Earlier, it was 40 lakhs vials per month. Very soon, 3 lakh vials per day will be produced. Monitoring is being done on the daily basis, and we would not leave any stone unturned to supply Remdesivir. Now, let's update you on the assistance provided by the centre to the Delhi government. Reactivation of the Defence Research and Development Organisation, or DRDO, COVID care facility with 500 ICU beds funded from the PM Cares Fund. Out of this, 250 beds have been made functional since the 19th of April 2021, and the remaining 250 are likely to be operational from Friday evening. All medical professionals have been deputed by Armed Forces Medical Service and Central Armed Police Forces. Sardar Patel COVID Care Centre at Chhatarpur is being reactivated. Home Ministry has directed to provide all medical assistance, including adequate strength of medical staff, to man 500 beds with oxygen support at the Sardar Patel COVID Care Centre at Chhatarpur. Centre has also increased the number of COVID-19 beds in various central government hospitals in Delhi. Now there are 3,623 COVID beds in central government hospitals, including 480 ICU beds with ventilators. Centre is further adding 536 more beds, including 250 ICU beds in DRDO hospital. With this, the total capacity of central government funded COVID beds will reach 4,159, including 730 ICU beds. Centre has increased the quota of daily oxygen to Delhi from 378 to 480 metric tons. Movement of allocated oxygen supplies being monitored on a real-time basis. In line with Prime Minister Narendra Modi's commitment to the poor, the Government of India has decided to allocate free-of-cost food grains of 5 kgs per person per month to nearly 80 crore beneficiaries for the next 2 months, that is May and June 2021, on the same pattern as the earlier Pradhan Mantri Garib Kalyan Ann Yojana. The Government of India will bear full expenditure of over 26,000 crore rupees on account of cost of food grains, intrastate transportation, etc. as part of central assistance to states and UTs. Home Minister Amit Shah, Defence Minister Rajnath Singh and BJP President JP Nadda have thanked PM for this initiative. Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman, in an interview with 2 publications, has said that the second wave of COVID-19 pandemic has been very challenging and immediate focus is on saving lives and ramping up vaccination. She also said that the government has decided to import medical quality oxygen as the demand has exceeded what was anticipated. She said that there is no need for across-the-board lockdown and states have been asked to identify microsites. She further said that the central government is ready to borrow as much as required and the state governments have been empowered to borrow more as states will need funds to buy vaccines. Front-loading of borrowing has been done to enable states to go for capital expenditure. On employment, she said, production-linked incentives are huge incentives for production. Mega textile parks, along with other sectors, will have direct bearing on urban employment. Ahead of the 7th phase of polling in West Bengal, Prime Minister Narendra Modi addressed the voters of Birbhum, Kolkata, Malda and Murshidabad virtually on Friday. Prime Minister also affirmed that if voted to power, BJP will end illegal immigration, syndicates and extortion hurdles in the state. PM also said that a record investment is coming to India and government wants a major chunk of this to be used in Bengal.
घुसपैठ, तस्करी, अवैध कारोबार, हिंसा, तोलाबाजी, सिंडिकेट, ये विकास के घोर दुश्मन है। भारत में निवेश करने के लिए दुनिया संभावनाएं तलाश कर रही है। लगातार रिकॉर्ड निवेश भारत में हो रहा है। इस निवेश का एक बड़ा हिस्सा पश्चिम बंगाल में लगे। यहां हर प्रकार के शिल्प को, हर प्रकार के रोजगार को बल मिले, इसके लिए बीजेपी सरकार भरपूर प्रयास करेगी।
Prime Minister also said that BJP will ensure that democratic power is brought back into the state. PM promised to bring Asol Parivartan to West Bengal with the support of BJP's double engine.
साथियों, परेड ग्राउंड से मैंने आपके बीच आकर पश्चिम बंगाल के बेहतर भविष्य के लिए आशोल परिवर्तन का आग्रह किया था। इसके बाद आपने जो मुझे और बीजेपी के हर साथी को जिस प्रकार से प्यार दिया, आशीर्वाद दिया, भारी मतदान करके समर्थन किया, उसको मैं व्यक्त करने के लिए मेरे पास शब्द भी कम पड़ रहे हैं।
Prime Minister Narendra Modi will launch the distribution of e-property cards under the Swamitva scheme on 24th April through video conferencing. 4.09 lakh property owners will be given their e-property cards on this occasion, which will also mark the rolling out of the Swamitva scheme for implementation across the country. Prime Minister will also confer the National Panchayat Awards 2021 on the occasion of National Panchayati Raj Day. Prime Minister will transfer the award money, that is grants and aid, through the click of a button ranging from 5 lakh to 50 lakh rupees. The amount will be directly transferred to the bank account of the panchayats concerned in real time. This is being done for the first time. 14 COVID-19 patients died after a fire broke out at the intensive care unit of a private hospital in Mumbai's Virar. There were around 80 to 90 patients in the hospital, 17 of them in the ICU when the fire broke out after a blast in the AC unit. The other patients in the hospital were not affected as the damage was confined to the ICU. The Maharashtra Chief Minister has ordered a proper investigation to ascertain the cause of fire. He even directed the administration to immediately inquire whether the fire safety was adequate in the hospital. Prime Minister Narendra Modi condoled the death of patients at Virar Hospital, taking to Twitter. The PMO said, and I quote, "The fire at a COVID-19 hospital in Virar is tragic. Condolences to those who lost their loved ones. May the injured recover soon." The Prime Minister also approved an ex gratia of 2 lakh rupees each from Prime Minister's National Relief Fund for the next of kin of those who have lost their lives due to the hospital fire in Virar, and 50,000 rupees for those seriously injured. And now some other news in News at a Glance.
The Supreme Court adjourned the suo motu case concerning issues arising out of the COVID-19 pandemic. A bench headed by Chief Justice of India expressed displeasure over the comments made by some senior counsels over the issue. The matter will now be heard on Tuesday. The Indian Banks Association has issued an advisory to all member banks in light of the rising coronavirus cases in the country. The advisory asks banks to restrict business hours from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. and stick to basic services only, winding up operations by 4 p.m. In Bihar, 9 persons drowned and 2 remain missing as a jeep carrying them fell into Ganga River from a pontoon bridge at Danapur near Patna on Friday morning. As the jeep took to the pontoon bridge, a portion of the bridge subsided, making the jeep lose balance and fall into the river. A special national investigative agency court in Mumbai on Friday remanded police officer Sunil Mani to custody till April 28th in the interior bomb scare case. It also extended till May 5th the judicial remand of suspended Assistant Inspector Sachin Vaze. The case pertains to the recovery of an explosives-laden SUV near industrialist Mukesh Ambani's residence in Tilia and the murder of businessman Mansukh Hiren. After getting approval from BJP National President JP Nadda, names of the national office bearers of BJP OBC Morcha were announced on Friday. The list includes former Union Minister of State for Home Affairs Hansraj Ahir and Muzaffarpur MP Ajay Nishad as National Vice President. The party has also appointed BJP spokesperson from Bihar and journalist Nikhil Anand as the National Mahamantri of the OBC Morcha.
In international news, the Japanese Prime Minister Yoshihide Suga declared a state of emergency in Tokyo, Osaka and 2 other prefectures on Friday in an attempt to combat a surge in coronavirus cases 3 months before the Tokyo Olympics is set to open. Under the new state of emergency, which affects a quarter of Japan's population and is set to run from 25th April to 11th May, the government will require restaurants, bars and karaoke parlors serving alcohol to close and big sporting events to be held without spectators. The state of emergency will cover nearly a quarter of the population and last through the Golden Week holidays, dealing a further blow to tourism and services industries. Western Australia's capital of Perth and the neighbouring Peel region will enter a snap 3-day lockdown from midnight on Friday after a man tested positive for COVID-19 after emerging from hotel quarantine. Health officials have said that he is likely to have contracted the virus during a 2-week quarantine stay in a Perth hotel, raising concerns about community transmission as more virulent strains emerge. The man was in Perth for 5 days before he flew to Melbourne, where he tested positive. Health authorities in Victoria, of which Melbourne is the capital city, are tracing the 257 passengers on board flight QF 778 from Perth. Russian President Vladimir Putin said that he would sign a decree to make May 4th to 7th non-working days this year and extend a public holiday period at the beginning of the month due to the coronavirus outbreak. The Russian leader was asked to consider the move at a televised government meeting about COVID-19. Deputy Prime Minister Tatiana Golikova today said that Russia has administered both shots of a COVID-19 vaccine to 6.8 million people, while 11.1 million have received the first shot. She added Russia has produced 27.9 million COVID-19 vaccine doses and 15 million have been made available in the civilian market. A search in the Mediterranean Sea for boats packed with migrants has found 10 bodies floating near a capsized rubber boat that was believed to have been carrying 130 people. Another wooden boat is still missing with about 40 migrants aboard. The civil hotline alarm phone had reported 3 boats were in distress on Wednesday, prompting SOS Mediterranean to launch a search in very rough seas with up to 6-meter waves. 3 merchant vessels helped the charity's own rescue ship, Ocean Viking, search for the boats in international waters northeast of the Libyan city of Tripoli. The UN's International Organization for Migration said in a report at the end of March that last year more than 2,200 people perished at sea. Indonesia's foreign minister has said on Friday that leaders of ASEAN nations believe a special summit this weekend could lead to an agreement that is good for the people of Myanmar. Retno Marsudi said the fact that leaders from the 10-member bloc are meeting in person reflected a determination to help Myanmar get out of this delicate situation. The ASEAN summit is set to take place in Jakarta on Saturday. Senior General Min Aung Hlaing, Myanmar's junta chief who ousted the civilian government on the 1st of February, is likely to attend. And the meeting is the first concerted international effort to ease the crisis in Myanmar, where security forces have killed hundreds of pro-democracy protesters since the February coup. Thousands of people gathered at the main square in Chad's capital in N'Djamena on Friday to pay their respects to the late President Idriss Déby. He died while leading his troops against a rebel offensive on Monday. Déby ruled Chad for more than 30 years and was one of Africa's wiliest political survivors, holding on to power despite rebellions that reached as far as his palace gates. Déby's son, Mohamed Idriss Déby, took power after his father's death. Mourners included President Emmanuel Macron of France, who counted on the long-ruling strongman as a linchpin in the war against Islamist militants, and a host of African presidents and prime ministers. NASA and Elon Musk's commercial rocket company SpaceX launched a new 4-astronaut team on a flight to the International Space Station, the first crew ever propelled into orbit by a rocket booster recycled from a previous space flight. The company's Crew Dragon capsule Endeavour streaked into the darkened pre-dawn sky atop a SpaceX Falcon 9 rocket as its 9 Merlin engines roared to life at 9:49 GMT from NASA's Kennedy Space Center at Cape Canaveral in Florida. The blast-off was aired live on NASA TV. The crew is due to arrive at the space station, which orbits some 250 miles above Earth, early on Saturday, following a flight of about 23 hours. That's it then in this edition of Newsnight. I'll be moving out of the safe environment of the studio, and hence I'll be wearing a mask. So we urge you as well to wear masks and keep the mask up and properly fitted whenever you move out of your homes. Thanks for watching.